and batshele ukuthi le nto le ayidlali lasithi labantu basenzela beyidlala abazodlalisa yonke into.
Should I start? I think Nadine has given out a couple. Should I start, Chair, while the screen is coming on?
No, let's wait for them so that
Okay.
yeah.
Because I don't have many slides, so I won't be long.
Yeah, you want to know. That's why we're starting with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Chair. Chair, so just if I can send apologies from our minister and also from my own boss, who's currently chairing or speaking to the meeting of the SCOA meeting on the quarterly reports to the Finance Committee. Chair, I also fractured my foot some weeks back, but I wanted to honor the meeting today. So I'm pleased to meet the colleagues in the meeting and to make the connection so that you're able to also, get into contact with us more frequently if you would like to. So it's a bit of a pity not everybody can see the slides, but I'll talk to the slides. So we got a first request from you, Chairperson, on about the 14th of June, where you asked us to comment on why National Treasury turned down a 500,000 donation of laptops to a particular private company. And then we got another letter from the committee dated the 29th of June asking us to talk to you about this merger of program 4 and 5 and other program issues and 1 and 2 other issues. So I'm going to talk today about 3 issues, but I also want to highlight some other areas where you may want to get back to other sections in the National Treasury. So I work in the public finance section in the National Treasury. There are also other sections such as the Accountant General and the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, etc., which deal with, for example, procurement issues. So there might be some other issues that you want to raise, which subsequently some of the people who focus on those can do. But let me start with the budget structure. So the Department of Women is one of the Women, Youth and People with Disabilities is one of the departments that was created through NMOG in 2019, the National Macro Reorganization of the States. And following that NMOG process, so bits of the department kind of came together there. And really both the budget structure and organizational structure are evolving. And I mean, we've worked with many departments over the years on budget and organizational structures, or particularly budget structures, because Treasury normally does the budget structures, DPSA does the organizational structures. We worked a lot with, I mean, I've worked a lot personally with budget structures on health department, national and provincial, so provincial social development departments and national, and so we've been, of course, engaging with the Women's Department on its evolving structure. In fact, Chair, I might also just say that actually, I happen to have co-chaired a book on budget structures with the World Health Organization in budget structures in the health space recently. Now, so these structures, Chair, they do tend to evolve over time. It depends also on what the priorities are of a department at a particular time, its maturity, the issues, and it also does to some extent depend on the priorities of the parliamentary committees. So, you know, so Chair, we do hear your interests and the things you want to see. So it is something that we should continue to engage with you. So the new budget structure submission as part of the 22 MTech followed the adoption of the new strategic plan and included some mandate changes from program changes. And so Treasury engaged with the department, spoke to DPSA, and we noted that, I mean, this department it's a very small department. And some of the original programs that came across from social development, for example, are really like extremely tiny. So, you know, although it may make sense conceptually for them to be a separate program, but if they are so small, that at this stage, it may still be better to house them as a sub-program. So budget programs have got subdivisions, which are called, of course, sub-programs. And if you consolidate across fewer programs, it makes environment easier for the accounting officer, because when you have each separate program that you have, there are rules for shifting funds between programs. You're not allowed to shift more than 8% between a program without permission from Parliament, for example. Treasury has to approve certain environment shifts. So the more programs that you have, the more difficult it is for the accounting officer. And a program comes with a great deal of administrative work. It comes with a lot of reporting, a lot of indicators, a lot of performance reporting, a lot of other things like that. Now, there's no reason why a sub-program in the budget structure cannot be managed by a DDG or a chief director in the organizational structure. So, I mean, if I look at other departments, I mean, for example, there are departments with sub-programs of billions of rand, tens of billions of rand, but we'll come to the size of some of these programs. And the current structure allows for the budgets of women, it allows for the budgets of youth, and allows for the budgets of disability all to be protected and budgeted for, and for the committee to see those budgets. Now, the way that this budget structure process works, Chairperson, is we engage with the department. We have a series of discussions with the colleagues, and some of them are here, and we enjoy working with the colleagues. And in a sense, we give feedback on their proposals, but the final proposal that comes from the department and was approved by the department. So, I think you should be a little cautious saying that, a particular structure, this is the only structure Treasury would approve, because the final structure actually is submitted by the department and it was approved by the department. In fact, let me say, I was actually acting DDG about a month or so ago, and one of my colleagues sent through a budget structure for a department. It had massive changes. It went from about 8 programs in that department to about four programs. And I actually didn't approve that as a budget, acting for that particular DDG, because I felt that needed more consultation with the department at the time. So, these issues have been through quite a lot of, so we tend not to force program structures onto departments. They're kind of the subject of negotiations, and they tend to evolve over time. So I would see this more as a compromise than, in a sense, Treasury said you must have this. All right, so if you go to the next slide, and this is a bit simplistic, the slide, because it only looks at the program. So the more interesting detail is in the sub-programs in the next two slides. But what you can see is that the original department had this program 2 called Social Transformation and Economic Empowerment. So program 1 was administration. Program 2 is called Social Transformation and Economic Empowerment. And the new program 2 is called Mainstreaming Women's Rights and Advocacy. So we far preferred the new name, Chairperson, because we thought it was much clearer. It was clear it was dealing with women's policy and rights issues. Social transformation, economic empowerment are sub-programs in the new structure. So we thought the new name is an improvement. The third program is a cross-cutting program. So it was previously called Policy, Stakeholder Coordination and Knowledge Management. The department's named the new program 3, Monitoring, Evaluation, Research and Coordination. Whether to have these cross-cutting programs or not, Chairperson, is a bit of a matter of discretion. Some departments have them, some don't have them. They can be they can be structured into the kind of core service programs or not. The department's kind of, preferred to keep this cross-cutting program. Now, the next two programs, as you'll see in the numbers, are very small. So what was persons with disabilities, it came across from another department as very, very small. And in this particular version, it's been merged with what was National Youth Development into a program called Mainstreaming Youth and Persons with Disability Rights and Advocacy. But if I can go to the next slide on the numbers. So Chair, I'm not sure, Chair, if you have the numbers. Do you have the slide with the numbers and the sub-programs? Because I'm a Treasury person, I like to tend to look at spreadsheets more than presentations. So let me get into the numbers. So Chairperson, so program 1 is administration. You'll see the size of this program is about 100 million a year. So about 98.7 million this year. Program 2 in the new structure. So this is Mainstreaming Women Rights and Advocacies. This program is 134 million budget this year. And it contains the Commission for Gender Equality, which is 100 million of that budget. So the women's budget without the CGE is only about 35 million. So we're talking about, this is a very small department. You'll see more of this even in the next slide. So program 3, which is the cross-cutting program, monitoring, evaluation, research and coordination, this whole program is 42 million. And if you look at the sub-programs, Chairperson, they are extremely small. Remember, each of these sub-programs are they're specifically appropriated by Parliament for spending in terms of these. They have specific objectives. Some of these sub-programs are 6.2 million, 8 million, 8.9 million. So these are very tiny sub-programs. In fact, in many departments, they would not even be sub-programs. They are so small. Program 4. So if one looks at program 4, which is now this combined program of youth and disabilities, so mainstreaming youth and persons with disability rights and advocacy. So the entire program is 711 million this year. The largest part of the program is the agency, the NYDA, which is 681 million. So the entire program, Chairperson, besides the NYDA, is about 20 million. It's about 25 million. We'll see the detail in the next slide. It's really, really small. And if you look at the size of these programs, I mean, the disability program is 16 million. The sub-program is 16.8 million. So, Chairperson, yes, you can create a separate program for this. You can pull it out. You can create a separate program. But in the scheme of the bigger budget system of government, this is really, really tiny. And it's possible that it can go out and become a separate program in time and have sub-programs and subdivisions. But you're really talking about a small number of people here with a very small budget. So if you go to the next slide, Chairperson, the budget trends, less entities. So what you can see here is the administration program this year in 22-23 is 98 million. The women's program is 33 million. Sorry, Chair, this is so what this does is this looks, the top part of the table takes the two entities out. So the women's program without the entity, the CGE, has got a budget of 33 million. Program 3, the cross-cutting one, has a budget of 42 million. The disabilities part of program 4 is 16 million, and the youth program is 13 million. So the whole department, besides its entities, is 205 million. The CGE itself as an entity is 100 million, and the NYDA is 681 million. The total this year budget of 987 million. Now, what this means, Chair, and this is one of the real problems for the department, is that when you get these very small departments, the administration as a share of the total vote, excluding the entities, is 48%. So the administration program is 48% of the vote, excluding the two entities, and it's 10% of the vote, including the entities. So it's a very high share of spending on administration. And Chair, this is not a fault of it's not a fault of the department. This is what it costs to administer a department, because it's very expensive to administer the department. But what it means is that the balance of the spending and the balance of the funds are in administration, and so that the line function of the department, which is, you know, the women's rights issues, the disability rights issues, and the youth rights issues are very, very small. So it's a structural problem of small departments, Chairperson. And so Chairperson, the committee can very easily see the budget for disabilities. You know, it's a small budget. It is 16.8 million. It is appropriated like this. It's fully visible in the budget structure. Chair, it could in a future iteration go out as a separate program, but it is really small. You know, it's possible if it grows a lot over the years, it may be worth putting back as a separate program. So Chair, that's more or less the nuts and bolts of this. I think the new structure is an improvement on the old structure. These things will keep evolving. I was just speaking to the acting DG. They're still struggling a bit with DPSA because the budget structure is approved, but they're still struggling a bit with DPSA on the improvement of the organizational structure. So I mean, I'm hoping will be sorted out soon, and we can also help to try and talk to DPSA if that would help. All right, Chair, the second issue which you briefly asked Treasury to comment on was a declined donation request. Now, your first letter, Chairperson, wrote to our minister on this matter, and our minister did respond in writing on this matter. So you do have a written response on the matter. But given that you have asked it again in the letter, let me just briefly explain this. So the department submitted a request to National Treasury to make a donation of R1 million to a private company. I'm not going to mention the name of the company here, but it is in the notes here, for a youth employment initiative. And the donation was partly in the form of laptops and a stipend. And so each student would get a stipend, and then the donation to the company would be for the procurement of laptops. So, Chairperson, I mean, this was a very nice idea. We really liked the idea of this. But there were several issues that were kind of from a PFM, a public finance management issue, were a bit problematic for the Treasury to approve in the way that the request came. So the first one, Chairperson, is that it is extremely unusual for the Treasury to approve a donation to a private company. Donations normally go to non-profits, and you can see, Chairperson, the potential risk and that could happen in the broader system if government departments are making donations to private companies. So it's very unusual for Treasury to approve donations to private companies. Typically, when the state uses a private company, there's a competitive procurement process, whether it's a procurement process or some kind of public-private interaction. And normally normally the competition is to ensure fairness of the process, because if one makes a donation to a private company, it's quite possible for another private company to say they have been disadvantaged in the process because it was not competitive. Then secondly, the donations of above 100,000, which this was either 1 million or 500,000, depending on how one looked at it, require approval by Parliament in terms of the PFMA. And then thirdly, we were a bit unsure whether this particular donation was best aligned to the department or to, for example, a body like the NYDA or one of the other departments that does that kind of work. So Chairperson, I think we liked the idea of this thing, but it had PFM problems with it, which is why we felt we couldn't donate this. As I say, Chairperson, the Minister did respond in writing to the committee on this matter. The third issue, Chairperson, which we understood from the letter you sent to us, was you asked for our what was the Treasury's understanding of the 5 million that was allocated to the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide? Like what did the Treasury see these funds would be used for? So Chairperson, the NSP for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide was adopted in 2020. It recommended that a council be established, which would give leadership in this area. And the interim council has been operating, but the formal council has not yet been established in law. So in the interim, the department appointed a small number of personnel to provide technical and administrative support to the interim committee, which would be responsible for the day-to-day running of some of this work. And this was discussed between the department and DPSA and Treasury. So Chairperson, the Treasury envisaged that the short-term budget would cover support for the operational cost of the unit and relevant activities. So, sometimes when you get a small unit like this in a department, it has some additional staff whose salaries have to be paid. Sometimes the operational costs of meetings have to be paid, or certain other operational activities. So that was the purpose of the 5 million allocation, was to support that kind of interim work. It reminds me a bit, Chair, of the way that the medicines regulator used to look under the health ministry. So for many years, before SAPRA was formed, the Medicines Regulatory Agency, the MCC, sat under the health department, but it was part of the department. It was run through the department, but it had external pharmacologists on the board. It was like that for 10 to 20 years. SAPRA was only formed as a public entity like 10 or 20 years later. So it reminds me a little bit of that structure. One must remember also, Chairperson, that this kind of structure is an advisory structure. And a bit like the department in itself, it's a coordinating advisory structure. It's not a line function structure for GBV. So it's not, for example, like the Department of Health, which has to look after people who are injured, or the Department of Social Development that has to counsel families, or the Department of Justice, or the police, which have got a line function operational role. This council is more of an advisory and a coordinating body. So in the longer term, we'll have to see what comes out of the legislation. But the way it looks to us is that the legislation is still advisory. And because of that, our sense, the Treasury, we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the final legislation. But I think the Treasury sense it should be a lean structure. It shouldn't duplicate the work of the department, the CGE, and other structures. Form tends to follow function. Because it is advisory, it's not very clear to us that it's well suited as a public entity or a government component. It might be better as a advisory committee, or even an interministerial committee, or some kind of other interim structure. It's not clear that a public entity or government component is the right structure, but we'll see what happens in the course of the legal process and what emerges after that. So, Chair, those are the three.
I may interject you regarding the GBV allocation, regarding that 5 million. So why was it allocated under goods and services and not in the compensation of employees?
Chair, that's a question the department would probably need to answer because the Treasury doesn't normally specify the items. And we could approve a environment if necessary. So I think the department would need to answer that. I don't know if you want them to answer that now, Chair, or subsequently. I mean, I'll just give you another example, Chair, of this. So in the health department, we gave the health department 44 million to set up an interim structure to run the national health insurance. And the department classified this as goods and services. But then they couldn't then appoint the people that needed to run the interim NHI fund. And this went on for over a year. The DPSA now approved the structure of this NHI structure. The Treasury approved the environment. So the Treasury approved the increase in compensation from goods because it was environment, because the department had classified the funds as goods. We approved the environment, but the department should never have actually classified it as goods in the first place. So, it's just one of those things, but the department can speak to that. But there's a lot of flexibility in those things, Chair. Each appropriation, these things can change. I think that I'm on to my last slide, Chair, so I can just finish. So just to express appreciation for meeting with the committee chairperson, we're happy to make contact. As I say, Ms. Modise, our DDG, sends apology, as does our minister, but we're happy to continue to be available to the committee and to support your work. Just to again stress that some issues such as procurement, deviations and condemnations are done by other sections of the National Treasury. Like, for example, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer deals with, for example, procurement deviations. So they could, if there's specific questions, because your letter did raise one or two other points, but in a somewhat way that we were a bit unclear exactly what you were asking. So if there are more specific questions that we need to direct to specific sections of the Treasury, we can do that, ma'am. So I think that brings me to the end of what we understood we were being asked, Chairperson.
Well, thank you very much for your response. And I'm happy that the department is here, they are listening. And they will also ask questions if maybe they still need clarity on some of the things. What we don't understand exactly, whether National Treasury is the one that recommended to the department that program 4 and 5 should be matched. And, if my memory serves me well, on the 3rd of May, 2022, the DG stated that the reason for the measure was that National Treasury would not fund the department if they don't match the two programs. And in that meeting that we had that day, she even mentioned that because as the portfolio committee, we were asking the DG many questions because we were concerned that the department is a department of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. So that on its own, it tells you what is their mandate. And when you don't find expression in terms of their programs, then we have a problem. So as the portfolio committee, we were having a concern. And we even indicated in that meeting that we are going to call in National Treasury, because from our understanding, it was that it's National Treasury who said they must measure the two programs. And if they don't measure, National Treasury is not going to fund them. That was the report that we were given in our meeting. Hence, we have called, we wrote to you, to the minister regarding the matters that we have raised that you are responding to. One, our main concern was that as a country, we have high rate of youth unemployment. And secondly, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, it's not like a service delivery department like other departments. All what they need to do is to mainstream issues of young people. And it's not their problem that the budget that is allocated for them as a department, small as it is, it's not their own making. It's National Treasury who's allocating monies to all the departments. And even if maybe they go and present their business plans or whatever programs or what they have, but still, they still get less funding as a department. You know, I got worried when you were reading the allocations of how much is allocated for the two programs. For you, 15.9 million, 16, yeah, is it how much? For disability is 16.8 million, and for youth is 13.7 million. You know, the way you were explaining it, I started to be worried because the expectations of what needs to be done by the department, this on its own, it's less. It does not even cover what many programs that they want to do as a department. So, and it cannot be correct that they measure. Sometimes you look at what allocations and they are made to be compared with other departments who are having a big chunk of budgets. Because it's what they're doing and those departments are doing, it's different. So for me, that one also, it's something that needs to be looked at because I think people out there, they are looking at this department as if it's a department that is not having interest of young people at heart. But they don't understand the frustration that the department has in terms of the budget that is allocated to them in dealing with some of this program. How are they going to monitor all the departments? They can't even go to private sector and monitor on what is happening there because they don't have budget. Their budget is limited. So they can't even do most of the things. But I think the other issue that is a concern, it's a concern for me, is that when I'm reading your page 3, where you say included mandate change and program changes and names, etc. You know, the question that I'm having is that how does this link to the department's plans to change organizational structure and request to DPSA? I'm trying to think, Guti, how does this link to the department's plans and organizational structure? Because we feel strong as the portfolio committee that the Department of Women is being treated unfairly, and even the budget that is being allocated to them, it's not according to what is supposed to be getting from National Treasury. And I'm sure if it's not us as the portfolio committee who raises these things to yourselves as National Treasury, there's no other person or structure that can raise these things directly to yourselves as National Treasury, because I'm sure they've been raising some of these things and they are not listened to. So these are, I'm sure, there's the few things that I want to raise with yourselves that we need clarity. Was it the recommendation of National Treasury? And if it's National Treasury, why were they threatened that if they don't measure the two programs, they're not going to be funded? Because that's not fair. That's not fair at all. And I'm not even sure whether the National Treasury does take issues of young people serious, especially in mainstreaming issues of young people so that this department can be able to monitor whether all government departments and entities, they do comply. So even with the disabled people, you know, it's like disabled people are not taken serious. They are like, they are not even, their dignity is not being respected. And it's like nobody cares. For the fact that when you look at the budget allocation for disabled people, it tells you that there's a problem. You know, civil society organizations, when they complain, it's like somebody, it's easy for National Treasury to shift responsibility and not take all the punches that this department is taking. So I think a National Treasury, when you look at some of the aspects that the department is dealing with, you need to have a clear understanding on what exactly they should be doing. Because for the fact that even themselves, sometimes they even change. Sometimes they are doing advocacy, sometimes they are a regulator. And when you look at what are they regulating, sometimes it even confuses us and maybe even confuses themselves. It's because of the frustrations that they are having when they go and present their strategic plans and their APPs to National Treasury. So they find themselves trying to do things, but the budget that they are having, it does not allow them to do things. So I felt that on behalf of the portfolio committee, these are the critical issues that you need to look at as National Treasury and respond. I hear you regarding the 500,000 donation of laptops that they wanted to do. You know, in my constituency, I was fortunate that I requested a donation from one of the embassies, and they donated 30 desktops and laptops to 2 schools in my constituency, and they have spent 300,000 and something. But it's one of the embassies, and you know, it's just unfortunate that the department, when they were doing this thing, we're not even sure ourselves on which schools they wanted to donate, and whether that private company, why a private company and not a school or whatsoever. I'm sure if they have written a school or you are going to give them permission, but the fact that they wanted to donate to a private company, that even ourselves, we cannot be able to advocate or negotiate on their behalf, you know. But let me give other honorable members so that maybe they do have some clarity-seeking questions. Honorable Piri, Honorable Boni, Masiko, do you want to ask a question?
I'm covered by your questions of clarity, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Mamhlengwa?
Chairperson, I'm also covered by your questions, clarity.
Okay, is Honorable Mpiti in? No. Not yet. Okay, over to you, Honorable Piri.
Thanks, Chair. The presentation is very tiny, as they've said, or even the budget of the department is tiny and straightforward. But I want to understand or make, you must make a further clarity in terms of on your page 3, under your National Treasury as you engage the department. I think it's bullet number 4. You say the structure allows for the budget of youth and disabilities to be protected. Then my question, or what comes in my mind, is protected of what? What is the protection for? From yourselves as the National Treasury, what is that protection that we are talking about? They must be protected from what? And you know, you further said when you were presenting to say, you know, it's you also, on my thinking, it tells me, or you are protecting them to bypass the law so that if they need more budget or shift of a budget to be passed so easily, not to come to Parliament. You have stated such a statement. So that's why I'm saying, you know, I want to understand what is this protection that you are talking about, or you are promoting the department to bypass other processes. So then it also tells us, Chair, as you have made your questions and comment, or the National Treasury, is it really the one that advises or gives a recommendation? I think their role, of course, they have a role to advise and give a department on how to handle their finances, how to structure, but then at the same time, the presenter said it's not compulsory, but it's just an advice. Then did you force them? Was it your advice to do that? What informed you? As you said, you are talking about small budget and all the stuff. It means it's you who advised them. They took the advice as the compliance or being forced. Because from what even yourself you are presenting, there's a bit of a contradiction there. To say it's you just said it was not a compliance issue, or it's not an act, but you agreed, and even on the presentation is that you made engagement with the department, as well as you work well with them as the two department, your colleagues, some are here. It means we have agreed. It's just that when it comes to our committee, it came in a wrong way. That's what I'm getting now, but I want you to clarify further. Chair, secondly, at the same time with the issue of donation, the gentleman is making it clear that it's maybe it's on the oversight of the department for giving it to a private company rather than to give it to a non-profit organization. If it came through to a non-profit organization, you are going to be tempted, nevertheless, of an amount that must be approved by the Parliament? Or what was your advice actually to them to say, if you can do it in this way, because we can see it's for the good of our people, our youth, they need these laptops. Now we are on a digital world. The schools are running with the laptops and all the stuff, and we've got those who are very disadvantaged. We need those laptops. What is your advice? If they took one school and donated directly, or individuals per batch? You spoke of if it's above $1 million or 3 million, and the first batch they release it with 500,000. You are going to approve. Then the next term, they release the second batch, you're going to approve. I want you to clarify that. Or is it an issue of a donation that you talk about per annum? It must not exceed a certain amount, because you must play a role in advising how will they deliver these things. Because this program, even though as a committee we're not aware, or we don't know how it was going to be done, but according to me, as a South African, there's a need of that program to be unfolded. What is your advice to be in a proper way that the department will deliver that? Bearing in mind, we got your advice, it must not be a private company, it must be a non-profit organization that must be donated to. Then it will end up in the hands of the right people who need those laptops. Chair, lastly, on the National Council on GBV and Femicide, You know, I don't get it if National Treasury, you say you gave them 5 million and you don't know how it's upon the department to structure it or to put it under goods and services and all the stuff. You don't get a loan. But I think it's unfair for yourself when you give a allocation or when you send a budget, you don't advise, because they stand a chance for you to withdraw the money, because if they allocate it wrongly, it end up wrong. Then you come back and question them and take back the money. So I think when you allocate, as you have made a reference to NHI, you need to as well give a recommendation. Yes, it's a recommendation, unless otherwise you say we have recommended, but the department decided not to entertain and they off-ramped from our recommendation and we can't approve this because the regulation says 1, 2, 3. But you need to be specific and assist the department. But the last point, Chair, is that when you measure the two program 4 and 5, is it your recommendation as treasurer to say they must only have one chief director, but knowing very well at the back of your mind there are 2 programs? Only one director must manage those 2 programs. Is it your recommendation, or it's up to the department to have 2 directors and run those 2 programs, even though to you it came as a one program? Because you need to be specific, and even when they come to present to us, now they must be clear, knowing very well they are firm with your advices, they are in line with Treasury regulation. We are not saying they must be bypassed your regulation, but we want to as well play your role as a supporting department, as a department that understands very well issues of finances. Chair, let me pause there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Piri. Honorable Poni.
No, thank you, Chairperson. I think on the last point on the duplication, or in terms of responsibility in the Department of Women, I think that one I'm covered. It was one of the questions I was gonna ask. But also taking from what you said earlier on, Chairperson, I think that when money gets to be allocated to departments, the size of the departments needs to be considered. It might look tiny or small department, but when you break it down into women, youth, and persons with this disability, it clearly states that, shows that each sector or category will need a specific attention and specific budget. Now, nowadays we are living in an era or time where issues around women and youth are out there in the media. We read about them, the abuse and everything, gender-based violence and all that. Now, if we have a department, because it seems small, and being allocated a budget that doesn't talk to their day-to-day responsibilities or tasks that they must complete or run with, it makes it very difficult for a department to can really achieve at the end of the year or the financial year. So I think it's important that when we set budgets, let us not look into the size, but the responsibility of the budget of the department, because this very department, Women, Youth and Persons with Disability Department, is under a lot of criticism out there. Things are happening and we are hearing words that are saying, but this department, what is it doing? And then we now get to understand when we deal with the Treasury report in terms of the budget allocation and so on. So we are kind of rendering them not effective out there because of the amount that we give them. And I think at this time, it's a time where we need to really be giving focus. We know other departments are equally important, but this one with what the sketch that we are having out there of GBV, we cannot be talking today about a GBV council that has not been established yet. So we are rendering them really ineffective and making their tasks very impossible to can be completed or achieved. And then also I think that we are expecting a lot from the department, but also Treasury must play their role in making sure that, especially where there are problems, because they need to be out there talking and addressing certain issues. They have people living with disabilities that needs their assistance. There are young people out there that needs to be considered in terms of what is it that this department is doing for the young people. The GBV issues, I don't want to talk about them. I think they've been overemphasized over time now. And I think let us really make sure that we assist where we can as the Treasury Department, and make sure that we give money also or budgets to the departments, but not with the focus of saying that we are going to go back to them and tell them to environment, issues of environment, and use money that were supposed to be done, used for something else, and take it to another area where it's not going to be effective or assisting this particular departments. So I think issues of women, youth, and persons with a disability are on the agenda every day out there. If we are not talking about them, the communities and people suffering out there are talking about it. And I think it's time that we really need to talk to Treasury and say that look into the responsibilities and the correct the roles and the responsibilities given to a department, not to say it's a small or a tiny part of kind of a department, in making sure that they are able to run with the day-to-day activities, and make sure that there's not issues of where there's underspending or whatever, let it be also addressed. But I think that the Department of Treasury and women can be able to sit around the table and assist one another, because the fear here is that when the more the budgets get cut, it will continue to be cut and it will make them really, really not effective. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Over to you, National Treasury.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. All right, firstly, Honourable Chairperson, the budget is approved by Parliament through the Standing Committee and Select Committee on Finance, through Cabinet, through the Ministers' Committee on the Budget. So the budget goes through many, many stages. So, you know, it's not completely fair just to say that, you know, that Treasury makes the budget. You know, it's a very long process that makes the budget. Then the economy slumped massively after COVID, to the extent that about 286 billion was cut from budgets. So going into next year, for example, we have situations like this. The health department, which I oversee, has a cut of 16.8 billion to provincial health departments next year. We have a question of what happens to the SRD 350 grant, which this year cost 44 billion. Last year it had, next year it has currently has no budget. There are cuts across all the sectors. There was about, in the 2021 budget, it was about 286 billion, which was cut across votes because the economy slowed so much. So, you know, the budget decisions are not easy decisions. I mean, health, for example, if it goes ahead with the 16.8 billion cut, would lose 15,000 staff over 2 years, for example. And that's a sector I oversee. So, you know, there are pressures throughout the budget. And when one looks at the needs of women, I mean, those needs have to be seen through by many departments. I mean, for example, for a woman to be safe outside her house in a township, I mean, that needs, you know, adequate lighting, for example, outside that house, a toilet that is, you know, in the house, not just far from the house, for example. Those things are not, you know, done by other departments as well. There are many departments involved in things that this department needs. I mean, this department, for example, does not provide us orthotics and prosthetics to people who are disabled, who need that, who need a wheelchair. It's a different kind of department. It's a policy department. So I'm not disagreeing with the very strong requests that have been made. I'm not disagreeing with that, Honourable Chairperson. But I'm just saying there are many needs in many places, and that's the difficulty in the budget process. With respect to should program 4 and 5 be demerged, that we have a separate program on disability? Look, we can demerge them. We can, at some point, as I said, this is a, the budget structure. It's a process in every year's budget. Just to respond directly to Honourable Piri on the question about whether these things are advisory or compulsory. So the Treasury has a compulsory power around budget structures. It's to do with that section in the PFMA, which says that the Treasury can regulate structures. So the Treasury, in a sense, has to concur with a budget structure. So it's not advisory in that sense. But the way that my team tends to work with departments is we attempt to work in a really cooperative mechanism. So, Chair, I really don't recognize the phrase that you mentioned twice. I cannot see that that the Treasury would say those kinds of things. And even now, I don't think that we would feel strongly if disability is with the youth program, or it's with the women's program, or it's with one of the other programs. I don't think we feel particularly strongly about that. I think all that we're advising is that it's a very small program. So it's a lot of work for the accounting officer to run a separate program. It comes with a lot of specific responsibilities. Is it worth it for a program of 12.8 million? At some point, if it were much larger, and at some point it would be worth it. But if it's a major issue over time, we could, I think that we could go back to having separate programs. So what is it protected from? So Chairperson, I think the key thing from our perspective is that when the parliamentary committee, whether it's your committee or the finance committee, looks at the budget, you should be able to, you and all members of the public should be able to see those allocations that Parliament has approved. You should be able to see the allocation for women. You should be able to see the allocation for youth. You should be able to see the allocations for disability in this vote. And you can see them, Chair. I mean, they are visible. They are visible and they are protected through that because they are being appropriated by Parliament for that purpose. So that is the protection. It's a soft protection. It's through that, and in the E&E, one can see those, one can see the programs and one can see the sub-programs. So it's not that they're not there, they are there. Okay. I mean, I could talk a bit more about the environment process, but it may not necessarily be helpful right now. So with donations, the rule in terms of the PFMA is a donation above 100,000 needs to be approved by Parliament. So if the department wants to make a donation, it should be put as part of the budget to Parliament as part of the appropriation bill, preferably as a transfer to a relevant non-profit, perhaps, or a school or something like that. I think that would probably be a better way of handling it. Chairperson, does that more or less respond to most of the questions?
If I may ask, from National Treasury, how much is budgeted for women? Not for this department.
So, Chair, that's a very difficult question. Our budget office is starting and is working actually with the Women's Department on a gender-based budgeting across government. So it is a kind of multi-stage process that they are working on, and they have put out guidelines on. See, if I look, for example, at the health department, I mean, the health department's budget is about about across mainly in the provinces is around 220 billion this year. But if you look at the gender breakdown, for example, of primary care visits, men are very bad attenders at clinics. About 70% of clinic visits are women and children. So the majority of the primary care health budget, for example, is actually on women. So if we were to disaggregate the budget, and it's not easy to do because one would have to put a gender marker into every patient's folder, for example. I would say the health sector certainly is substantially women. Social development, a lot of the spending goes to women. So there is a whole process on gender-based budgeting, which our budget office could try and talk the committee through on how they're trying to put the process of gender-based budgeting in process, what guidelines they're putting to all the departments in order to consider gender issues in their budgets and make their budgets more sensitive to gender issues. The Women's Department has spent quite a lot of time actually working with our budget office on that. But it's a large share of the budget, Chairperson.
A large share, but in terms of reality, we must see it must translate to that large share. Because when we talk of women empowerment, of which these are some of the things that this department should be monitoring in other departments, that's why I'm saying how you do it. It's not correct that this department should be compared with other departments in terms of allocations, because the work, the responsibility that they have is different from what other departments are having. But I will hand over to the department. So, and over to the department, Minister and School Melanie.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members, officials from Public Works, Treasury, and other colleagues present with us here. Listening to this conversation, it was like going down the memory lane and actually checking what patriarchy can do. Patriarchy does not mean men. Patriarchy is patriarchy. I wish one day, someday, South Africa could look at the needs of the underprivileged and the vulnerable South Africans with another eye. This is not your meeting is not a meeting where we're supposed to be, campaigning or for more funds. But every nation worth its salt, that this nation cares. People look at how people with disabilities are taken care of, how youth is prioritized, and how women are treated. It's painful that in South Africa, we start by looking at big departments. We start looking at the sizes before we look at the value of what do we want to achieve out of this? What is it that, why did President Ramaphosa put women, youth, and persons with disabilities together, all the vulnerable groups in one place? And then we sit in one other corner and say, this is very, very, very small. It's not like building a road. This year, alone. We promised the nation that 7% of disabled people will get access to governance. We are struggling to make 1.5 because there's no money. Why? They're small. But when you look at the individuals who are disappointed by the way they think they're an afterthought, it really would break your heart. They live out of handouts. I'm not talking social development. I'm talking about empowering them. As one young woman disabled said, we are not that thing. We are a diversity of God's creation. But I must say that I saw this in other countries. Since I came back home, I do not see South Africa thinking of how we, where we are sitting, Chair, we should be advocating for this other diversity and how to support them, not how to want to do things for them. But how do you do that when you first you must be a department that gives big tenders, big money before you can look at advocating for monitoring and evaluating on those people that really matter, that shows that you care, the vulnerable. Even at this era when we have more than 7 million people unemployed, majority of them are young people. At first we said, no, they're not educated. Now we know they're educated, maybe not the way they should be, maybe not skilled in accordance with the way the economy is structured. It was never structured any other after apartheid. Every morning I wake up, I ask myself, my God, why did I celebrate 1994? Was this about the right to vote for and vote to be voted for? Or was it about really the economy of this country? What has structurally changed? I don't know. Because young people, African, but Black in majority, are still spectators. And they are now thinking, maybe they should throw stones. Maybe we will listen. But then women. The other day we had CGE, celebrating the 25th anniversary of the CGE. Yes, all of us, Chair, you included. We thought, why do these people need those other countries need a ministry of women? It's not necessary. They're going to pocket us into some small corner. We want to be all over. The answer is yes. Even today, we want to be all over. But we want a department whose work will be advocacy, which will monitor and evaluate if we're doing things right. Not that something is about to be created somewhere, like the Eastern Seaboard. Women must come after. So the cake is on the table, women must only wait for crumbs. Life is gonna be like that until, I don't know whether there's a thinking agency politically in Treasury, or it's just about sharing the loot to the one that looks like would spend more or not. Let me go to the gender-based violence and femicide. Yesterday I passed by a clinic because I had to. I don't have time. I say I pretend because we all must check if our status of health. As I was sitting there, one woman receives a call. Her next door neighbors, a man, came back in the middle of the day. He had 5 children and a wife. He just came in, they were relaxed. He shot all of them all the children and the wife and walked away with a gun. What kind of a society is this? In Pretoria, yesterday, because there are no means to monitor, skill our people in how to look at women differently before you put a tender somewhere, because they will never even reach there. But even if they do, I wouldn't have time, Chair. The value for the job is not equal to the salary you get at the end of the year. We worked for 2 years after the summit of the national of the gender-based violence and femicide summit using the NSPs, and we all agreed we need a national council because we were too disparate all over the place. It took us 2 years. Finally, we can look at you in the face and say, finally, after having consulted everybody, even the ones who say, why are you slow? But when they are together, they are like, hey, that's not important. But now we're ready. Next cabinet, whether it's next week or when, we will submit that memo to cabinet and bring it to cabinet, to parliament. My prayers are that we take this to parliament like yesterday, so that we have a national council for gender-based violence and femicide. But you were given 5 million to do something about this. If you don't spend it, we're taking it away from you. But when you know that you still have to go through NetLeg, you still have to go through all this, you needed money to go through all this disparate groupings. But when the council is formed itself, you will need even more money. Who is thinking with us? Who is putting on thinking, is it blinkers or glasses? Just to say, this society, where do we want to take it to? Where disabled people will feel wanted, where youth would feel they are indeed the future, where women don't have to go squat, in another department. I'm not saying that this Department of Women must be doing everything for women. Women are a majority of the people in this country. They must be everywhere. But there must be advocacy for something that doesn't happen properly for women because of patriarchy. We still live in a patriarchal society, and we cannot, say we are over it. The thing about the donations, I think the officials will respond to. So I'm just pleading or asking if in Treasury we just talk about money and we're not talking about people, but we put all the vulnerable people in one little corner and we forget about them. It's like the budget is very small. What will make it big? Because we don't think the way we said we are going to put them here so that we can be able to look after the policies that will make that better. President in 2020, August, said, we shall set aside 40% procurement of all that goods and services that are procured by government. What year is this? 2022. How many departments have tried to get there? Between 13 and 25. Far from that. Then they, no. We need another bill. We need to put a bill through parliament before we empower these people. This is the life we live with a no budget. If you're talking budget, the thing is, I was about to say, let's put another day because this is not mean combat, but everybody knows that like the priest was complaining on Sunday, people take the small changes and throw into the bucket and say, this is what we give into God. When they've bought everything else they like, then they think of women. I think I am having a feeling that we don't have that in Treasury. It's yes, no. What this figure? Who brought this? This is tiny. This is a tiny budget. Let's not worry about it. Let's wait until they know what they want to do. Last year we gave them 5 million. Where is the council? When you have to use the 5 million to consult, 2 years it took us. And here we are, proudly saying, yes, we did what you asked us to do, and we will move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. CFO.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to respond to 3 key issues that I've noted when Mark was presenting. Firstly, I want to talk to the issue of the budget structure. Mark indicated that Treasury didn't force the department, but I want to report that when we started this process, the budget that we submitted to National Treasury that was signed off by the accounting officer reflected 5 programs. And when National Treasury responded to the department, when we were at the final stage of the process, it was indicated that this is the final budget program structure. Maybe, Mark, the challenge could be that you were not directly working with your team that we work with. And the final communique that came to the department, it demonstrated that the final budget program structure of the department must have 4 programs. And it's a comparison, the structure that we received from Treasury. It's a comparison in terms of what we submitted and what Treasury advised and concluded on. The department was adamant from the onset that the 2 functions for youth and disability must be separate. But because of the recommendation where, Mark, we didn't have an option as a department to go ahead with the 5 programs, was for 4 programs. I'm happy that you indicated that if the department want to dismantle the 2 programs from program 4, we will embark on those discussions with your team. The unfortunate part is that the window period has closed for the budget program structure that would be implemented in the 2023-24 financial year. We will wait for the period to open next year in June, wherein we will make a submission to National Treasury to have 5 programs for implementation in the 2024-25 financial year. On the issue of the allocation of the GBV budget of 5 million that is in goods and services, we continuously engage and discuss with Treasury. The recommendation was that the money must be under goods and services. And when DPSA, having worked together with Treasury and the department, approved the interim.
CFO, if we are saying process is closed, I mean, do we processing?
Mark will advise, because in most cases, when we want to review the structure, Treasury would then indicate to the department that we have to wait for the window period that normally starts in June every financial year. Treasury would advise if it's still open for us to make those requests for implementation in the coming financial year.
Because it does have a bearing. It has a negative impact, because remember, we have a chief director and a DDG or whatever. Those 2 programs have got their own staff complement, and it with our positions are high. It means if we are not faneke lawo ma-post amanye faneke alokhu njani faneke niwakhiphe. So wena mawudlala kanjalo kuzoba inkinga yakho.
Chair, as I've indicated, we will be guided by Treasury on the way forward. On the issue of the GBV, yes, the allocation from the onset was on goods and services. As I indicated, the department worked together with Treasury DPSA in terms of the establishment of the interim structure for secretariat. When the posts were approved, we made an application to shift a portion of the 5 million to compensation of employee during that financial year and over the MTF period. And we are also advised by the team, Mark, from your unit, that that money must remain within goods and services, and we will shift the COE portion on an annual basis. And based on what we have just indicated, that it is the discretion of the department in terms of where to allocate the budget. When we finalize the E&E process for 2022-23 financial year, will also include the shifting of the COE budget of the council from goods and services to compensation of employee. On the issue of the donation, I'm also going to request Dr. Benis to give more background on the program. I want to explain that the application in terms of the business case that was submitted to National Treasury by the department, it did not stipulate that the donation will be made directly to the company. The business case that we submitted indicated that the department will procure the laptops and donate them to young people that participate in that development program, and also that the stipends that were going to be paid for the program that they're participating in, they were going to be directly transferred to the TVET colleges where these young people are allocated. Through you, Chairperson, I'll request Dr. B to then give them more background in terms of the program that we envisage to make a donation to. Thank you.
Thanks, CFO. Thanks, Chairperson. I just want to clarify regarding the issue of the 4IR Youth Employment Project that we were approached as the department by Digititan, which indeed is a private company. But like the CFO has clarified, there were no intentions to donate the money or to donate the equipment to the private company. The intention was to procure in the department and then directly give those laptops to young people. And we were working very closely with Tshwane North and Tshwane South TVET colleges. So in terms of the recruitment of young people, it was going to be done through the two colleges, and there was not going to be any involvement of the private company. The role of Digititan in this regard was to impart the skills or to train the young people who are involved in the program. So that is the role that they were actually playing in the entire program. And as the department responsible for youth development, our role was to facilitate approval of the program by cabinet. Hence, we felt that because Digititan is contributing in terms of skills development, we need to also make a contribution as the department. And then there were other role players that we were also mobilizing so that they can become involved in this program. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to make a few additions, I'm covered by the Minister, CFO, and Dr. Benis. but I just want to support your strategic posture on this matter, Chairperson. We are all acknowledging and noting that as a country, we have a youth bulge in terms of the population, which is plagued by issues of unemployment above all the other ills, social ills that are facing us. And from where we are sitting, Chairperson, we would have preferred Treasury, even if they were saying it's not procedural to do it this way or that way, that in future, when we come up with such innovative ideas, they be the ones that are saying, you can't do it this way, but do it this way. That's what we normally say, even when we engage government departments that are just dismissing applications from women when they apply for whatever and say, you don't just send a report and say, declined, not approved, without telling the person, what is it that made that person not to qualify, so that that person can address to those areas of development and can resubmit and get the application considered. So that would be our first plea to National Treasury. But also from his response, there was an indication that they are prepared to open up this conversation in terms of the two programs that they merged. And with your plea and question that they will still respond to, whether we have an opportunity, considering the comment made by CFO that there's a window period, if we still have an opportunity, one would still appeal to Treasury to be our spokesperson, to play that advocacy role on our behalf. Now that you understand where we're coming from, Minister's opening remarks were clear. There was a reason why the president had to bring the 3 special focus areas under one roof. Now with that premise, we would then appeal to our colleague from Treasury, who is in our midst today, to assist us in playing that advocacy role, to bring that item back on the agenda and see whether we can do something about it. Not unless prescripts are saying you can't, you'll have to wait for that window period to come and go. So that's the inputs that we would like to make at this point. Chair, I only forgot to make an apology earlier on when I introduced myself. The DG is on an official travel and they will only be returning tomorrow. It is for that reason that I'm acting in her capacity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister, and your officials. Over to you, Mark.
No, Chair, I have nothing to add, just to thank all the, thank the Minister, the acting DG and the team for the comments. You know, I think that it would not serve purpose to engage further on some of the details of the specific things. I think we can do that separately with the department, but just to express appreciation and value for the inputs that different people make. And, you know, I think sometimes people are trying to get to the same end, but are trying to get there slightly different ways. So we appreciate your interventions. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mark, for coming to our portfolio committee. I hope now today, department, you will work with Mark, and you will work with our Department of Women very close, so that at least you had our concerns. And Tina, we want to way forward. We don't just do a talk show as a portfolio committee, because if things are not happening, we'll call you again. You'll receive another letter from us. Yeah, thank you very much. You can leave the meeting, it's okay. And then the next department will be Public Works. DM, we need to know why is your department dragging their feet in ensuring that our Department of Women relocates to the new offices. I think there was a letter that was sent to your department, and the reasons that we are given as the portfolio committee, okay, bye, are not acceptable at all. We want this department to be in the new offices. What is the problem? Over to you, DM.
No, thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and once more my greetings. Earlier, when I was greeting members, because Minister is next to me, I didn't count it. And I realized afterwards that I had skipped her. My apologies for that. She's my big sis. There's no war.
There's love.
There's love between us. It's well, Chair, coming to the matters on the table. Let me also start by apologizing for Minister who is in Pretoria attending to some urgent business there, and who has delegated me to lead the delegation today. The other person who was supposed to be here is the head of the PMTE, which is the trading entity of the Department of Public Works, to which the real estate unit accounts to. He is off sick, and hence you will realize there is nobody at that level in the meeting, but we have the DDG, which is the Deputy Director General responsible for real estate. And they will be the ones going through the report. But just to say that this should not arise, that we come to a portfolio committee to discuss matters that interdepartmentally we should have cleared them. And therefore I want to upfront apologize for that, especially that now I know that the issues on the table are getting off the table as we speak. So I will allow DDG Nyeleti Makubel to lead the presentation on the issues and the processes that had caused the delay. But as I say, it is now an issue that is, well, according to the reports I have, is getting off the table. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Over to you, DTJ.
Thank you, DM. Good morning once again, Chairperson and ministers and honorable members. I think the Chairperson and the DM have already dealt with the introductions of why we're here. And mine is just to go through the presentation as we have prepared. We have prepared the presentation quite a while back. I think it was in July when we submitted the presentation. So some information may have updated in the process, and we will try to cover as much ground as possible. We received a request from the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities in 2020 to acquire 7,145 square meters and 302 parking bays for them for a period of 5 years. After the advertisement of the tender in 2020, we received 5 bids and they all were dismissed as non-responsive at the time. You would remember that 2020 was a difficult year, so procurement was a bit tricky then. And then in 2021, we tried to resuscitate the process to then go out on tender again. That is when the client then approached us because they had at the time decided to go to National Treasury to get approval for them to do the procurement themselves. And then before they could finalize with National Treasury, we as Public Works had another process running for another client, which was the Department of Military Veterans. And we were procuring space for them for about 3,145. At the end of that process, that department then said they're no longer interested in the building that we had procured for them. This is when, in order to avert the impending fruitless expenditure, because the tender had already been awarded, we then engaged DWYPD to say, would you be interested in a building that has already been procured? To which they then, the DG, I spoke to Advocate Joyce Malulek, who agreed with me that maybe they can look at the building. So this was in June 2021. They went to view the building and they showed interest in the building, and then they wrote to us to say we can go ahead and do a swap. And we did our own internal processes to then swap the DMV for this particular client. And then there was a process between ourselves and then the client and obviously the landlord to do space planning to make sure that everybody is then accommodated in the building where they're supposed to be, using our building norms, the sizes of the offices, where the offices will be. And that process was finalized, I think earlier, is it in June this year? Yes. Yeah, in June in 2022. So where we are, and I think that is why the DM is saying we are stuck, we're at the tail end of the process, and the matter is about to be removed off the table, is that everything is done. The first inspection was done by the municipality. They had a few issues that they've raised, and the landlord has taken care of that. And as we speak today, the inspector is doing his final inspection, and we're hopefully then we'll get a certificate of occupation. And with that, the client will be able to relocate. There were back and forths in the previous 2 weeks between ourselves and the department where they wanted to move in, but we advised them that it is not advisable, because once you move into a facility and you don't have the necessary certificates, it might create a problem in the future, maybe not, but we want to play on the safer side. But fortunately for us, we do have the chief inspector from Tshwane today, who is doing the final inspection, and we're hoping to get a go ahead so that the client can move in. And then the current status of the leased building now where they are, we had extended the lease. And I think that is why the problem was raised in the first place, because the client said, why did you renew for a year? It was just for us to have a leeway to be able to operate and not have to go back and forth and say, can you extend by 1 month? Can you extend by 1 month? But we are able to exit the lease. It's not that we are bound for that period. In fact, we had given them a notice for us to vacate, but that was before we understood that we're struggling with the municipality, where they're not issuing the occupation certificate yet. But as soon as it is ready, we're out of the building. So we're not stuck in there for another year, just to give the client and the portfolio committee some assurance where they are currently at best met. We are hoping that if today we get a go ahead, then we are moving in. Then there was another matter, Chairperson, with regard to the Commission for Gender Equality. We have received a letter from them, I think it was in 2021, to renew the lease where they are. Because the landlord is a national landlord and
we felt that maybe it's important that we invite you as the portfolio committee so that at least you account on why is the delay, you know? Because at some stage, the DG, I could see that, hey, now she wants to cry because it's like she was not getting anywhere regarding the relocation. But any member? Piri?
No, Chair, it's clear. It's clear we are covered. You know, the DM started very well. And I could sense my question la very tactical. But hey, you DM very strategic. But DM, can you promise? I carry you are here as a political head by the end of next month. Can we give you only September, and you promise us, or by the 1st of October, there will be in a new building? Can you really make that commitment? If they are not happy with the inspection of today, can you push them within September? They must have finalized everything. It's a done deal. It's a thorny issue to us because we question them about the rent and finances, and even themselves, it frustrates them. But just for, can you commit yourself, dear?
Thank you, Chair. Much as the issues of compliance are not really in my control, because these certificates from the municipality, if they are not complied with, and there's an accident in the building, we then become liable. So when I'm saying, in as much as that is not truly in my control, but given where the project is, one will work to ensure that, in fact, as they were speaking to me, I could accept your recommendation or your proposal on the basis that theirs was less time than yours. So mine and them as official, the timeline is less than what you are giving me. So on that basis, I'm accepting the proposal. I will still have time to push.
Yeah, nizaqosha lo benimnikeza responsibility ukuthi ayenze sure ukuthi yonke into right.
Yes. We will deal with that. No, thanks, Chair.
Shoki.
Thanks, Chairperson. You know, by now I always come with pleas and questions for clarity. And it's related to the one raised by our member on the other side. Should we not move by September, for argument's sake? Are we still safe in the building where we are at? Won't we face, because we don't know what will happen today. They're inspecting, and our request to them was that if it's about electricity, then it's fine. What we are pleading for is not coming up with piecemeal findings every now and then. Can we get a composite assessment? Can we know that there's no wardrobe here, there's no bed, there's no whatever? I'm just citing an example. And then we know we have this plan and we work on something. So even now, yes, we are working on the basis of hope, but hope and reality is something else. Should it emerge out of that assessment today that you can move by September, the question is, are we safe where we are at now, Wamkash? Won't we have a situation where we are told eviction? Because that is what keeps me awake at night at this point. Secondly, when we engaged just recently, we were also informed that we will get a report back in 2 weeks, more or less, even though they're going to do it today. Working with that timeline, as I thought maybe 2 weeks, it's mid-September, then we were also advised SITA couldn't do the cabling and other stuff because they are waiting for the certificate of occupation. You also need another 2 weeks because SITA does have other clients and all of that. So basically where we are at, we are looking at the month of September as a whole to accommodate all of that. And if we can just have a project plan that interfaces with all of that, carefully monitored with regular report backs, and we all know where we're standing, we will appreciate that. But really, if it doesn't happen in this month that we are looking at, can we get some level of assurance with Queen? Thank you. Chair.
Yeah, I think Shuki, you need to deploy a senior official, to work with them regarding all those things that you just mentioned. Because my worry is when you deploy sometimes junior officials, all those integrities about big, foot baba slow, footy, about akshay born. So if you can deploy a senior official to work with the DDGA so that you know exactly what is happening. Because a problem you didn't have someone who was consistent with them. Maybe even the issues that you're raising, you should be having a better understanding what are the issues there. Yeah, so I think that will be the best solution for yourselves as a department. But I take a commitment DM very serious. When you commit in the portfolio committee, Tina will call you, Tina Salandelele. As far as portfolio committee, ukhuluma namhlanje as sokubuyisa futhi DDG ngizohlangana nawe ngasakubheki futhi estradini. So thank you very much for your report, and I can see that you want to tell us something. Uchino Maspal.
No, I just wanted to give the assurance that no, there is no risk of eviction at any time soon. Thank you. As Father told him from Maspal.
Angeke nesithole sestradini.
No.
Nifane nathi la eParliament njengoba singana office.
Well, unless kungasho nakhona, yeah, might have a problem.
No. Thank you very much, DM and DDG. Thank you for the feedback that you gave to us as a portfolio committee. Hopefully in October, you'll be relocating to your new offices. I think what you need to work on now is for that SITA. They must start preparing themselves so that after 2 weeks, but stories among my clients and so forth. No, we are not going to take stories. Otherwise, you must tell them they'll come to the portfolio committee. We'll summon them to the portfolio committee, which they must come and tell us because you've been in their list for a very long time. So they can't give you stories. Yes, siyabonga kakhulu. And nihambe kahle ubuyele ekhaya. Hayi cha. Abasidingi futhi asifuna ukuthi
Recording stopped.